Welcome everyone, and welcome to our Vets Hope for Vets program. And I have a special guest here today, Mayor Dan Corbin, and he's been a friend of mine for, we were talking earlier, almost 30 years. And in that time, I really never heard him talk much about his military service. I knew he'd been in the military. I met him when he was a teacher out at CTC, and then we served together in political office. But Dan, I wanted to talk to you today about your service. I know you're a Vietnam era vet, or Vietnam veteran, served for a year there. So tell me about your experiences and how after Vietnam you dealt with those.
Yeah, well, I joined the Army the same year I graduated from high school in 1965. Vietnam was going on, and I applied to go to Spanish language school at the Presidio, Monterey, California, and went there for 6 months and then went to Panama. And later I went to engineer officer candidate school and got assigned to 8 months of Vietnamese language school. And then after some other schools, I went to Vietnam and I served a year with the 101st Airborne Division. And it really wasn't a very pleasant experience. I think I've talked to very few people who ever enjoyed their experience in Vietnam. And you know, there were several things that happened over there that you kind of just bury. My first job was flying as an aerial observer with the 220th Reconnaissance Airplane Company in a single-engine fixed-wing airplanes called a bird dog. They were a very small plane. The pilot sat in front and the observer in the back, and we would go take pictures I'd use a 35mm telephoto lens camera and take pictures of interdiction points along Tiger Mountain. And every afternoon we'd get shot at the same place. You couldn't hear it, but you could see the tracers coming toward you. And after about 6 weeks of that, I unvolunteered. And one of the problems was that, you know, several months later, my replacement, a fellow named Thomas Dolan, their plane went down at the demilitarized zone, and he was missing in action for years until he was declared dead. But he was a member of the 101st MI Company, the same unit I was with, and we flew as aerial observers there. And that always caused me to feel somewhat guilty because of the fact that I unvolunteered for that and my replacement got killed. And but I dealt with Vietnam the same way that many veterans did. I just ignored it and buried myself in my work. Was an absolute workaholic, and just pretty much ignored my family and just buried myself in my work and did that for years. And it was finally within the last 15 years or so, I got involved with veterans organizations. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me, because by helping other veterans, I really dealt with some of the issues that I had buried.
So Dan, when we were talking just a minute ago, we talked about being a workaholic and taking an absolutely incredible amount of hours to get your degree. And then you also talked about your marriages, having been married 4 times. You want to talk about the workaholism and the avoiding of the issues that happened to you in Vietnam, and kind of share those with the audience?
Yeah, when I don't particularly want to talk about the things in Vietnam, but when I got back from Vietnam, I asked to be assigned any place east of the Mississippi River, and someone who flunked geography assigned me to Fort Hood, Texas, which, by the way, is not east of the Mississippi River. And it was the best thing that happened to me because of Central Texas College. So I worked as a lieutenant at G-23 Corps by day, and then went to school Monday through Thursday nights from 6 to 10. And then on the weekends I did my homework. So I pretty much ignored my family. But after 2 years of that, the Army sent me to school at the University of Illinois. That was my assignment. I was a captain, and for 2 years I went to school. I took 103 semester hours in those 2 years. Studied for and passed the CPA exam. So once again, I totally ignored my family and just buried myself in my work. And then after that, I owed the Army back 4 years. So I worked by day at West Fort Hood at the Tradoc Combined Arms Test Activity as an electronic warfare test officer. And then I worked nights and weekends for a CPA firm so I could get my experience to get my CPA license, which I did after 3 years. And then I got out shortly after that and went to law school at the University of Texas, where I commuted back and forth between Killeen and Austin, and did law school in 2 years and 4 months. And then I started building my law practice. So all this time I'm just totally bearing everything with work. And you know, that can be really harmful to your family life as you, in essence, ignore your family to death.
So you started to say earlier about you had these issues that happened. You dealt with them by working yourself to the point where there was no other time for anything else. And then you mentioned that you started to get better when you started to help other veterans. Tell us a little bit more about what you did. I know that you were commander for the American Legion for the state of Texas, and I know that you've been involved in a lot of the Area Veterans Advisory Committee and those kinds of things. So what else, how did helping other veterans help you?
Well, sometime, I guess around 2000, Tommy Fisher, who's recently deceased, he was the commander of American Legion Post 223. And he came to my office and said, "You're a veteran, we really need you to help us at our post. We'd like you to be our judge advocate for the post." So I started getting involved with the post, and then later got elected as the commander of the post, and got involved with the Fort Hood Area Veterans Advisory Committee, the AVAC group that you've been secretary of for many years, and just started you know, getting involved with the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and then we started a Vietnam Veterans of America chapter, and I was president of that. And just by working with the veterans organizations and helping other veterans with the same problems I had, I was helping myself. So I would encourage people veterans who have issues, which are most of us, to get involved in veterans organizations and associate and help other veterans who are going through much the same problems you are. And by helping treat them, you'll be treating yourself.
Yeah, we find you know, I work with peers and veterans helping veterans. And we find that sometimes the veteran comes to help the other veteran, and accidentally they find help too.
Right.
And so I think by giving yourself to the other veterans who just because of your service you're connected to, then you inspire hope in them. If they see you and you're able to reach your success and do the things that you've accomplished, then maybe there's hope for them. So you're an inspiration of hope.
Well, you know, I think that people who have been through the war experience, whether or not it's Vietnam or whether or not it was our fathers in World War II, they didn't want to talk about it, and they didn't want to deal with it, and they didn't want to deal with the past. And there's something to be said for that, but I think that you have to look at your own experiences and say, you know, it's time to deal with it. Many people don't deal for it like me for 30 years. Mm-hmm. But it's time to deal with it, and I think we have a much healthier life after we've dealt with these problems.
And I think, you know, sometimes our veterans are survivors. They're able to go every day, go through the motions of having a living, but then they're not really living because they're not experiencing the joys of life, the things that people that have never been to war experience all the time. And so I think your ability to inspire hope in the other veterans is really something to be looked for and to be admired. So do you have anything that you'd like to tell a veteran out there that maybe is struggling with trying to, maybe they don't want to acknowledge that they have an issue, and how can they get from avoiding to coming into a life with a meaning and a purpose?
The best way to deal with that is to find someone who has a common background with you. And you can find those in your local veterans organization. Mm-hmm. In that group of hundreds of people, you will find someone with your same background that you share experiences with. Mm-hmm. And just the 2 or 3 or 4 of you working together, it'll help you learn how to deal with that and really have a productive life in the future.
I want to thank you, Dan, for coming today. I appreciate it a lot.
Mayor,
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to be on the program.
Okay, and we'll be back in a few minutes. We're going to take a short break. We'll have Josh home, and he's going to explain his experiences. Thank you very much. Oh, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're having Hope for Vets here, and we're hoping that at the end of this program that the vets that we have that are here tonight can inspire hope in your life. So we have Josh home with us now, and I just met Josh about a week and a half ago, And he had a very compelling story, and I thought we could invite him to come down here and tell us what happened to him. And Josh, tell us a little bit about your experience. And you're pretty young, so we know that you're in the current war on terror. So tell us what happened to you.
Yes, Maureen, thank you for having me here tonight. Well, I served in Iraq in 2003, but before I go into the story of Iraq, let me talk about how I joined the military. I joined the military in January of 2001, and I joined as a reservist, just wanting education and just wanted to fulfill the obligation because I come from a strong military background in my family. Okay. My father could not serve because of disabilities, but outside of that, my grandfather, my aunts, uncles, cousins, strong military background. And so my brother joined the military, then I joined the military as well. And but when 9/11 happened, everything changed. And I saw how all the chaos began to bring everyone together, and I was like, this is not what should bring everyone together. But I also said, you know what, there's a fight within me that has to go and fight, because if not, we're going to be fighting right here in our own lands.
Yes.
And then, but I had the question, what if? What if I would have never joined? You know, so to answer that question, I went ahead and joined active duty service, got released from my reserve unit, and went active duty. In 2003, I deployed to Iraq in 2003 with 4th Infantry Division and 1st Tour. While deployed to Iraq, I was injured multiple times, and I don't, for the sake of time, I don't have time to go into all detail of that aspect, but I was injured 3 times while deployed. But I'm going to focus on the last injury, because I fell twice while running from mortar attacks. The first one, a 60mm mortar landed 3 feet in front of me, and I fell while running from the mortar attack. So as I'm falling, as I'm basically doing a face plant, my legs outran my body, and as I'm falling, the 60mm mortar landed 3 feet in front of me. Did not explode, but it embedded in gravel, so the gravel became shrapnel, which cut me up from head to toe. Felt like I had bees stinging me on my face, neck, and hands. Mm-hmm. I was taken to the medics. I was given 2 weeks of light duty, and then I returned to duty after telling them I don't want to go home. This was the second time that I refused to go home. The third time they didn't even ask me. They already knew my mind was set up that I was going to stay in the battlefield unless I was going to be in a body bag. But the third time, and see, the third time's a charm. I like to say it's a ringer, because I'm still hearing the buzz from the explosion and everything, and it still impacts my life on a daily basis. But I can say I used to see it as the most horrific thing. Now I can say it's one of the most terrific things that ever happened to me. Because what I realized, if I would never fell in that hole, while running from mortar attack, I got hit with the side blast of an 82mm mortar when it hit the latrines beside me, over 25 feet away from me. But I got hit with the side blast, so I felt like a gust of wind hit me in my chest and threw me over to the left. Felt the warmth of my right leg, didn't realize I got hit. The adrenaline was too much. As I'm running from my bunker, when I'm running from my way out, before I made it to my way out, I could see my eyes on that bunker. I never made it to the bunker. I fell into what's called a spotter hole. And it's a 10 to 12 foot chamber. I hit my head going down. I broke my right ankle 4 places, my left ankle 3, shattered both my knees, splinter fractures to both my legs. I just like to say Humpty Dumpty lives. I make more of a joke of it now, because now it's so light of a situation for me. But the reason why I say it's one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, because if I would never fail, I could never ever have been lifted. And the thing is, I came back with a splintered body, but I came back with a shattered heart. And because I had lost hope. And without hope, you cannot be helped on any given level. And so when I got back from Iraq, I tried to act like nothing ever happened. Because in the military, I was taught 3 things. I was taught suck it up, drive on, shoot, move, and communicate, and then adapt and overcome. So that's exactly what I did. So my pain just really began to be, I turned it into energy. And until I found that I had a traumatic brain injury in 2008, and then also in 2009 when I had 2 brain hemorrhages and stroke-like symptoms, and I could not do anything on my own anymore at that time, I just sucked it up, and I just drove on.
So up until that time, you just kept on carrying on, avoided thinking about it, and just carried on like as if nothing happened. And then your body wouldn't let you do that anymore.
It shut down. My body shut down.
Okay.
But there was a perception that I lived by, and I believe a lot of veterans live by this, and even people that never served in the military but been through traumatic events. They believe we come into this point where we believe that isolation is our independence. And I can tell you that isolation is not your independence, it's your desolate.
So I know that you have a very strong relationship with your wife.
Yes.
And so tell us about how isolation worked in the relationship with your wife. That doesn't, to my way of thinking, that doesn't make sense or doesn't work. What happened to you?
Yeah. Well, I had isolated myself, and I began to push my wife away. And my wife, she's a fighter, and she was fighting for our marriage. And I did not realize that I had just basically became blind to everything around me. And pride was blinding me from seeing the reality around me.
Okay.
And because the things you're ashamed of, you don't talk about. And I wasn't talking about the war, I wasn't talking about my experiences, but it was one day when my wife had enough. And she said, listen, if you're gonna act like a child, I'm gonna treat you like a child. She put me in the corner, she locked my wheelchair down, and she walked out. And when she walked out, she said, you need a timeout, and I need a timeout. Now, I don't know if she was gone for minutes, hours. I know it wasn't days, I didn't get that hungry. But I say that because that was the greatest thing she could have ever done. Because when she put me in the corner, I had nothing but to face that corner. And what I've learned is 3 things to overcome anything in life. You've got to face it, embrace it, and replace it. And the things you're not willing to face, then you can't do anything about. And so I didn't like to, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't like what I saw, so I looked away sharply. But when I looked in the mirror again, I heard a voice within me say, what do you see? I said, I see a victim. And I said it very harsh. And that voice said, I see a victor. So I had to realize that I had to change what I saw. I couldn't change the pain. It's a constant. It was always going to be there. But I had to turn that pain into energy once again, and I had to focus on just the simple things that I could do.
So I know just from talking to you that God plays a big role in
Most
your
definitely.
recovery, but tell me some other things that other tools that you use that help you to get past that point where you were totally ignoring your symptoms, ignoring what happened to you. Then you had this stroke-like symptoms, and I understand your wife had to take care of you, do everything for you for like 9 months, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So that's kind of a humbling experience.
Yeah.
So then you're in the corner, you're looking at yourself, you find out that you could be a victor rather than a victim, and then what happened?
Well, my wife told me once again, she said, you got to find purpose. And so then I just began to type on a keyboard with 2 fingers. And then I wrote 8 letters to God, and those 8 letters to God became my first book, Some of My Life Lessons, which is now my blueprint to everything I do. And so I just released my last book called Life After the Fall in January. But writing has been a sense of release for me, because we have to find our sense of release. We have to find something, because what I had done is I put all those memories and I put all those horrific thoughts, I put them into a coffin. But there's a man named Dave Reaver that I met in 2011, and the very first day I met him, it was the most offended time in my life, because the things I had buried, he began to unbury. And he began to put a chisel into that coffin and pry it open.
Yeah.
And that helped me to see that I was nothing but I was carcass.
So who gave you the hope? Did the hope come from within? Did it come from someone else?
Yeah.
Or did it come straight from God?
Well, it came straight from God in my sense. But then there's 3 things that I believe are my heartbeats in life. And I believe that it's my faith, it's my family, and it's also a future. Because I can see ahead and see that I have something to live for, and that's hope. And that's what keeps me going every day. And what I've learned is that the more I give away, Maureen, the more that it's given unto me.
Okay.
And the thing is, like, the more I share my story, the lighter it is that I carry. You know what I'm saying? But yet it's helped someone else out. And we don't know the words that you have within yourself, your experiences, but when you turn your experiences into an encounter, that's what changes your life and changes everyone else around you.
And so you never will know, in some cases, what words you said that inspired hope in the other person.
Correct.
But yet you've been able to affect change on their lives in a positive manner.
Yeah.
And so we thank you today for being here and for sharing that with us. And keep on hanging on. I appreciate you coming down here,
Yes.
Josh.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to come back in a few minutes for our next guest. And we'll see you, and thank you very much for tuning in. This again is Hope for Vets, and we're trying to inspire hope today so that veterans out there that are listening find out that they're not the only one, that there are other veterans out there that have experienced similar circumstances, and they're here to help you. Okay, welcome back to Hope for Vets, and I have another one of my friends, P.W. Covington. I think we were talking a minute ago, we've known each other probably about 4 or 5 years, can't be for sure. But P.W., you want to tell us a little bit about your military service, and then we'll go on to get into the real nitty-gritty, okay?
The nitty and the gritty.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me here, Maureen.
Sure.
I appreciate the invitation. I was in the United States Air Force. I joined the Air Force in 1992 as a 17-year-old. I was an air transportation specialist. I served with the 2nd Mobile Aerial Port Squadron out of Little Rock Air Force Base. And my first deployment was to Somalia in 1992 as part of Operation Restore Hope. I was in the Air Force for a little less than 6 months at that point, and I was part of the international peacekeeping operation there. It was a unique mission because it wasn't serving the United States, it was serving the UN, and it wasn't a war, it was a humanitarian peacekeeping operation. Which is unique at the time. So there were a lot of stressors there that peacekeepers face that were unique and remain unique. Even once we got back, it was difficult explaining even to other military members exactly the sorts of stressors and the sorts of things that we faced there. And to this day, it's still a misunderstood mission and with misunderstood stressors.
Okay, so here you are, you're 17 and a half, whatever, and then you get stuck in this war zone. And even though it was a peacekeeping mission, there was a lot of stressors that went on there. And so after you, how long did you serve in the military total?
Oh, about 2 years.
Okay, and so then after you came back, what happened to you? How did you deal with that?
I came back to a military that was drawing down.
Okay.
There were a lot of drawdowns coming down, and not unlike the military of today. And there was, my career field was eliminated. The squadron that I was in our tasking was eliminated. I was involuntarily cross-trained and sent off to another base. The focus was not like it was before, and I was given a job basically putting cardboard boxes together. I wasn't flying around the world throwing stuff out of the back of airplanes anymore.
Okay.
It didn't fit well with an 18-year-old. So I got in a lot of fights, started drinking a lot, started getting in a lot of trouble. Article 15 started piling up, and the Air Force gave me an opportunity to become a civilian again. I took it. Got out with a general discharge under honorable conditions.
Okay.
Hit the door, loved it, got to be a civilian again. And I kept, that downward spiral continued. You know, it didn't take me long to end up homeless. It didn't take me long to end up with a drinking habit that was even more out of control. Dropped out of college, hit the streets, ended up in prison, 2 or 3 failed marriages. Went that way for 15 years. You name it, I made the mistake. I got the full ride out of PTSD. Okay. Imprisonment, jails, broken relationships, terrible relationships with my family. There's family relationships of mine that still haven't mended. The whole ride. I went 15 years without even thinking about anything being my fault, without taking any responsibility for anything in my own life, and without wanting or seeing the need for any repair in anything in my life. It was, I like to say I got the full ride.
Okay. So you struggled with PTSD for all those years. Did you recognize or did you know that you had PTSD? Or were all these other things just happening?
I completely denied it.
Okay.
What I did was I listened to a lot of the older veterans that I encountered out on the street and in jail and in other places. I thought about going to the VA and asking about things, but I kept hearing that whole, the VA is trying to kill you. Don't listen to the VA. Don't take a car back to the same mechanic that broke it. Don't do that. Don't go there. They're trying to kill you. I believed that, and it kept me sick. It kept me incarcerated. It kept me destroying the lives of people around me.
So when did you come to the realization that you accepted that there was something wrong? Because, you know, all the things you're talking about are symptoms of something that happened that's not been dealt with.
Oh, it's
so how did
textbook.
you come to the realization that you had these issues, and then what made you seek help?
It wasn't one thing, and it wasn't all at once. But I'll tell you what made the biggest difference to me is I was out in California. I was in People's Park in Berkeley, California, and I had just eaten a free meal, and a couple of volunteers from the Oakland Vet Center walked up, and they were doing outreach, and they walked up and they asked just a simple question: had you ever been in the military? And I said, yes, I had. And they gave me a card and they said, you should come over and you should check out what we have available. And they gave me a card, and I didn't go over the next day, and I didn't go over the next week, but eventually I made it over there to see what is available. And I went in there, and all we did was fill out an informal claim. That's all we did. And it maybe took 3 or 4 weeks before I heard back with even a follow-up. And maybe it took a year after that before I did the next thing. And maybe it took a year before I took the next step. But the biggest thing that helped me was, I don't know, maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago. I finally took the responsibility of getting enrolled in the VA's inpatient PTSD program here in Waco. And it really put a mirror up to my own actions and my own behaviors and forced me to take responsibility for some of the things for all of the things that have been going on in my life. And you know what? The only thing that was common in all of that was me.
Yeah. And so once you recognized that and you sought help, tell us how your life began to change. And maybe there's a soldier out there that's got an Article 15, and maybe he's been self-medicating with alcohol because it's readily available and it's accepted in society. And what advice could you give that person?
You know what I'm going to say is, I wasn't the best airman. I sure wasn't. I'm still not the best person. I know me, I live with me. And that doesn't mean that there's not hope. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be a better person tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to be better. You know, give yourself a chance. There's life outside the gate. There's life beyond the Army. There's life beyond the Marine Corps. There's life beyond the Air Force. It's this, where you're at right now is not where you're going to be, man. Just give yourself a chance.
Okay, and you started doing peer-to-peer work. I know that you've written several books on helping other veterans get through it. So if you're going to give us a last comment on inspiring hope in that person maybe that's out there suffering, what would you say? It's
tough right now. You had to be tough to where you're at, to get where you're at right now. You've got the strength within you. Just find a way to get out of where you're at right now and give yourself a chance to be something and to do things differently.
Do you think that, like I was talking to Mayor Corbin earlier, he said that helping other veterans and working with other veterans really helped him?
Oh, yes.
So do you have the same experience?
I do, with a slightly different tact on it.
Okay.
You know, the veterans organizations are great. If you're in an area where those organizations are vibrant and they're actually doing things, I live in a bit more rural part of the state, and a lot of those legacy organizations honestly aren't doing a whole lot.
Okay.
But find those organizations that are. There's great organizations out there that aren't sitting around drinking beer and playing dominoes all day. They're actually getting involved, boots on the ground, in disaster zones and involved in building projects and volunteer work in organizations. Find those folks out there. I can name probably 5 or 6 of them off the top of my head right now, but find them, the ones that are active in your area. They're out there. And they're not just sitting on their duffs doing things at the lodge. Find those folks that are out there putting boots on the ground and getting to work. They're out there, and they need those skill sets that military veterans have.
And I know that you, when we first met, you came through the Military Veteran Peer Network and was trained to do facilitation for peer-to-peer. And do you still use peer-to-peer to help other veterans?
I do. Actually, matter of fact, I just got invited by the International Association of Peer Specialists. I'll be speaking at their convention in, where is it at? In Philadelphia in August.
Okay.
So still active in that, not quite as active as I'd like to be in my local area on that, but at the state and national level I am.
Okay, any last words you want to say to inspire hope to that one person?
You're worth it.
Okay.
You're worth it. Don't give up. I don't care what your command says. I don't care what your command says. Don't give up on yourself.
Okay, so inspiration and hope. Thank you very much, PW, for being here today. We appreciate it. And so we're going to meet up with our next guest, and that will be Everett Kelly. And Everett was in the military, in the Army, and he's a pretty good friend of mine, so I'm looking forward to seeing another one. All our guests are friends of mine, so as you can tell, we have a good relationship. So hang on for a few minutes. We're going to take a break, And we'll be right back with Everett Kelly. Thank you very much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the program we're having, Hope for Veterans, or Hope for Vets. And I have now with me one of my volunteers that volunteers with our organization here in the Killeen area, and his name is Everett Kelly. He's also a peer mentor with the Bell County court system, and we're actively recruiting for mentors out there. I'm going to put that plug in. So Everett, we've known each other, I don't know, 2, 3 years, I don't even remember, but tell me a little bit about the situation. First of all, tell me about your military service. I know you're a Vietnam era veteran, but then tell me about the struggles that you have, and then how you got to us would be a good thing, okay?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
I was drafted in 1965, and I entered on active duty in the U.S. Army in 1966, and Vietnam was hot and heavy, and I thought I was on my way. Turned out that they were looking for electronic people, so after basic training and thinking I was going to be a killer, I turned out to be an electronic technician. And that sort of changed my world from, you know, coming, as I say, I was drafted into the military, and then I was trained, and they did a pretty good job of training me. I experienced a lot of issues and traumas in the military, but I think I had a successful career. I would say I had a successful career because I did suck it up and move on. And as a result of that, I became an angry man. And I stayed angry for a very long time. I never went to war. Sometimes I wish I had, but that was then, this is now. I became a recluse after I retired. You know, I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to socialize, and I was just bent on taking care of my children and my family, and no one else. I didn't care about them. I mean, I was just finished. I mean, people had turned me off. And I went into isolation, and I went to the VA mental health clinic and started going to groups there. And through some, I thought they were very good psychologists, and I've had 2 good psychiatrists since I've been going there. And the groups have been very helpful. Now, one of the groups that was most helpful to me was the, what do you call it, telecommunication, the what is it?
Telemedicine? Or teletherapy?
It's, yeah, it's Skyped, and it's I can't even think of the word, but it's a counseling program that's 12 weeks long, and if you go through this program, there's significant benefit from it. Telemental health is what it was called, okay. What it is called. And the person that was the counselor was an individual by the name of Carlos D. Rivera. Now, Carlos, after the first couple of weeks, he started mentioning a program where he thought would benefit me with my anger and isolation and stuff. And it was Bring Everyone in the Zone. And he told me about it a couple of times. It took a couple of months, but I finally went to the location, knocked on the door, and I met Colleen. And for those of you that don't know Colleen, she's Maureen's sister, and very helpful, good person. And Colleen introduced me to Maureen. And I've been going to our peer support grouping and on Thursday nights, and it has really made a difference for me. It has brought me out. I would say it has brought me back into the community somewhat. And, but I will say that if you are having troubles out there and going through a military experience like I did, I think the VA mental facilities are excellent. I also feel that getting involved with a group like Bring Everyone Into the Zone, peer-to-peer support networks, I think this works very well for all of us.
So that doesn't mean that you don't get angry anymore, right? Because you're a human being. And so you get angry, but how has doing the peer stuff and doing the telemedics, the telemental health, helped you to deal with it so you don't berate yourself because, oh, dang it, I thought I was over this anger and now I am angry again?
Well, in those groups, they teach you about controlled breathing, also whether to recognize whether the situation is worth the effort. Is it real or is it imagined, you know? So it gets you to question yourself before you, how shall I say, it gets you to slow down.
Okay.
It gets you to not burst out.
So when the anger starts to build up, because anger is an emotion, it starts to build up, you're able to somehow recognize those triggers and then do your breathing or how do you what do you call it? Kind of like calm yourself down so that you don't blow up.
Along with the medication, the deep breathing, and how shall I say, just asking yourself those simple questions. Is it real or imagined?
Yeah.
Is this something that you really need to blow that steam off at right now?
And sometimes people do things that make us angry and they don't even know they did it. And so what you're saying is you're checking yourself to see if, hey, is this something that's worth it to you, right?
Right, absolutely.
Okay. And so you talked to, I know, we're pretty good friends in group and stuff, and I know you talk about, we're not supposed to talk about what happens in group, but you say it's your social hour.
It is.
So if it wasn't for group, what would you be doing?
God only knows. I'd probably be in my recliner watching TV. Isolation, more isolation.
Yeah, and isolation's not good for you.
I don't feel isolation is good for anyone because I think we need companionship and communications, but it's the trust factor when you're dealing with people. After you've been, after your anger has been triggered, it's very difficult to trust people.
Okay. And so, how are you? You're doing pretty well now. In fact, I've never seen you angry. So, anything you'd like to tell some veteran out there that's listening that might help them, along their way to recovery and to moving toward hope?
Yes. I think I'd like to, for any veteran that has been in my situation who, I mean, they don't have the draft anymore. But if you find yourself in the military and you decide to make it a career, do what you can to serve your country to the best of your ability. And when you get out of the military, if you are experiencing issues, seek the facilities that the military has for you at the VA, the mental health facilities, and the hospitals. They are good and they work. And reach out in your neighborhoods and try to get connected with a military peer-to-peer group or program that believes in veterans helping veterans.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back for our last guest speaker in just a minute. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this time has gone by so fast I can hardly stand it, but I have saved my best for last, and this is Viet Wells. We've known each other probably about, maybe 3 or 4 years, but she comes highly recommended, so you'll see in a minute, but Air Force veteran and a dog handler. So you want to tell us a little bit about your military experience? Why did you join the military? At the time that you joined, not a lot of women were joining, so.
Thank you, Maureen. Actually, that's a really funny story. When I first went to join the joined the Air Force, I ended up, it was not a dare, but somebody told me I couldn't do it, so I did it.
Okay.
It was a joke, and I said, I'm going to join the military, and they said, you can't do it. And I said, well, guess what? I'm going to go do it. So I did. And to pick the military, I didn't like the uniform of the Navy. I didn't think it matched me. And I thought that the Marine Corps was kind of colorblind because of their uniform. And there was no way I was going in the Army because my brothers had been in the Army. And I thought, blue, that's a great color. So I picked the Air Force, and that's actually how I picked it.
Well, we never know what motivates us to do stuff, but it ends up, works for us, right? So I know that you served in Desert Storm.
Yes.
And you were deployed, and as I said earlier, you were a dog handler, so you want to tell us a little bit about your deployment and your experiences, and you might want to share the things that you share with me that I had no idea about. If not, you can keep them to yourself. It's up to you.
One of the things about being a woman and being in the military, and especially being overseas and being in Desert Storm, was that I didn't just have to watch out for ambushes and other things. I actually had to watch out for my own people. Many, many times, the people who were the most dangerous to me were my fellow soldiers. I was a dog handler. I had a military working dog, and that's the only reason why I'm here, is because he was a big bad, his name was Killer, and he pretty much saved my life quite a few times. Overseas, and I think that's the biggest thing about women in the military that a lot of people don't understand. I have the combat experience, but on top of the combat experience and watching out for, like I said, ambushes and the such, I was watching my back too.
Yeah.
And I watched my back 24/7. There were no downtimes.
Well, what people don't understand, I think, a lot of times is the same numbers of people in the general population that do things that are not right are the same percentages of people that are in the military that do things that are not right.
Right.
And so being the lone woman or one of a few women in a combat zone probably had the extra worries about watching your back, and war changes people, and sometimes in the military there are predators, and we know that that's an unhappy topic that we try to avoid talking about, but it's a reality. And we appreciate the women that are coming forward now that are really talking about these issues to make it better for the other women. You know, my mother was in the Army, Nurse Corps in World War II. I don't really know much about her service. She served 10 years total, and then she got out and never talked about it. So, and she's deceased, so I don't have any idea. But maybe sharing your story, what did you do to get past the issues that you had when you're from your military service?
Well, from my military service, I actually didn't get out of the military in the normal sense of getting out. I was discharged. Honorable, but general under honorable conditions. Over in the military, over in Saudi Arabia when I was there, my supervisor decided that he wanted to sleep with me, and I decided didn't want to sleep with him, and pretty much it was, yes, you're going to, and I ended up telling people that that's what was happening, and I got into a lot of trouble for talking. When I got back to the States, I was threatened that if I said anything, I would be kicked out of the military, and I said, okay, fine, I'm talking, and that's exactly what they did. And since then, that's pretty much, keeping quiet is what they want you to do. Absolutely.
And you've never stopped talking.
I know.
Because you've written, what, 8 books on the subject?
Yes.
And you're trying to get the message out so that the future service members don't have to deal with these kinds of things?
Well, as law enforcement, I knew that there were other women like me because I actually had dealt with the other women. I was pulled off lots of incidents and lots of investigations because the women who were there and they had been raped, I was considered too close to it because I was a woman, because I was taking their side. And we didn't believe in victims. We believed that, well, we believed that everybody was a victim. Everybody's a suspect, even people who had said that they'd done things. The questions that, and the way in which we looked at most victims was an interrogation to try to trip them up so that we could prove that their story was wrong. And that's how we were all taught how to move on any investigation, especially one that had anything to do with sexual assaults.
Okay, so it sounds to me like it's deplorable and unhappy topic. How did you go forward after those experiences and come to the point now where you have a very successful life and you've been able to move on and deal with it? How would you inspire some hope in another female veteran, or even, you know, military sexual trauma happens to males too?
Yes, it does.
And people don't talk much about that, but how would you inspire hope in that veteran that's out there listening that maybe hasn't come forward or maybe doesn't know what to do about it?
Mostly to talk to somebody, get it out, find somebody who you can trust to start, just at least to start the conversation. The biggest and the hardest thing is to keep it inside, because eventually it'll leak out, but it won't leak out in the nicest ways.
Okay, so you talk about it leaking out, so what happens, negative repercussions at work? Maybe you're there but your mind's somewhere else? And
not just repercussions at work, repercussions in your entire life, repercussions at work with your any of your relationships, because it's a secret and it's something that a lot of women and a lot of men keep very much deep down inside because of embarrassment, and mostly because a lot of people push back on the victims that it was their fault, knowing that there is not a single thing that they did or could have done to make them not be a victim. It wasn't their fault. The only fault in the whole thing was the perpetrator's fault, and it was his to choose.
And military sexual trauma is between two people, although gang rape is possible.
Right.
And so there's a perpetrator and a victim, but the victims suffer from a lifelong of PTSD, of maybe they do the avoidance and the isolation, blame themselves, a lot of self-recrimination and guilt. And so how would you address that in someone that was out there still suffering now?
I would say it's going to be hard, but to actually just to completely break the silence. One of the big things about just sexual assault in itself is a taboo. It's something that we consider taboo to even talk about. Mostly in the military, it's not just the sexual assault that happens, it's also the rest of it. It's the betrayal from your commander, the betrayal from your supervisor, the betrayal from the military, and if you did or when you tell, them telling you, no, this didn't happen, you don't understand, miscommunication, this or that, or outright you're a liar. But one of the big things for women and especially for men is to find groups and find other peers, find people who you can trust, and start to, even if it's just talking about just anything small, start to speak about what happened. Okay. The more we stay silent, the more I think it'll continue to go on.
Well, and I'm hearing from you that, you know, peers were the perpetrators, but then now in the end, peers become the people that are your partners in recovery, or you're not a benefactor, I don't want to say that word, but they're helping you to get to the place where you need to be after the bad experience. Is that right?
Yes, and I think that's the hardest thing about going to groups, because you're right, but sitting in a group, there are perpetrators. And that's one of the hardest things. That's why most of the groups, when a lot of us even go to, they sit and we're very, very quiet. Because we know in amongst that setting that there was possibly a perpetrator there, and they're not going to say anything.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can screen them out, and we are good at doing that, I hope so. Well, I appreciate you telling us about this unhappy topic. I don't like to really talk about it, but it's a reality.
Yes, it is.
And if more people know about it, if it comes out from the darkness, then people will get hope, and they will be able to recover. And so I want to thank everybody for being here today. This was the Hope for Vets, and I appreciate all 5 of my guests for being here and sharing their stories of recovery and hope. Thank you very much.